Entire cities have disappeared beneath the desert dunes. This is the story of how we find them again. By the end of this journey, you will understand the precise methods that bring a vanished world back from the sand. We will see how a single coin can rewrite a trade route, and how a city's final meal hints at its fate. How do you rebuild a place that left no witnesses? The final green fields of an oasis did not vanish in a single storm. They faded, season by season, as the world around them grew quieter and drier. This is the silent engine behind every lost city, a process we call desertification. It is not merely a lack of rain, but a fundamental transformation of the land itself, where soil loses its vitality and the very air seems to thicken with dust. For medieval communities living on the edge of fertile zones, this was not an abstract climate trend. It was the slow, relentless rewriting of their reality. Researchers examining ancient climate data, from tree rings to sediment layers, see a story of shifting rainfall patterns. Rains that once reliably nourished crops became unpredictable, then scarce. At the same time, growing populations and their flocks could place immense pressure on the land, clearing protective vegetation and exhausting the soil. The combination was often devastating. A well could run just a little lower each year. A pasture might take longer to recover. The boundary between a thriving town and a desolate ruin was not a wall, but a creeping line of sand. Consider the southern edges of the Sahara, where grasslands steadily yielded to dunes over centuries, or the great river basins of Central Asia, where waterways that sustained empires gradually shrank. These were not passive backdrops, but active forces in history. One can almost feel the anxiety of a farmer watching the horizon, seeing the dust clouds grow larger and more frequent, knowing the wind was carrying his world away piece by piece. This environmental context is everything. It frames the immense challenge these communities faced, and it explains the strange gift they left for us. The very sands that swallowed their homes also sealed them in a dry, silent tomb, preserving a moment in time for us to uncover centuries later. To find a city, you must first understand the desert that created it. That fragile parchment in the library is not just a story, it is a set of coordinates. Before a single shovel touches the sand, the search for a lost city begins with words. The great medieval travelers, figures like Ibn Battuta from Morocco or Marco Polo from Venice, were walking censors, recording everything they saw with a merchant's eye for detail and a storyteller's flair. Their journals are the first whispers from the silence, offering a narrative framework for the entire search. Imagine reading a 700-year-old description of a bustling caravan stop, with its specific number of gates, the color of its mosque, and the peculiar fruits sold in its market. This is not a legend, it is a witness statement. Historians and linguists now perform a kind of textual archaeology on these accounts, meticulously cross-referencing every detail. They must separate the traveler's genuine observation from the inevitable exaggeration, the local myth they may have been told from the reality they walked through. For example, when a chronicler writes of a city of 1,000 wells in a desolate region, it is not taken as a literal number, but as a vital clue. It tells researchers to look for a place that once had a sophisticated and extensive water management system, a capability that leaves distinct marks on the landscape, even from space. The description of Sijilmasa, the great gateway to the Sahara, in various Arabic texts gave archaeologists the confidence to search a specific stretch of desert in southern Morocco, leading to the discovery of its extensive ruins. These texts answer the most basic yet crucial questions. Where do we even begin to look, and what should we expect to find when we get there? They transform a vast, empty desert into a focused search grid, all based on the words of someone who stood there centuries ago, watching a city breathe. The search for a lost city no longer begins with a map drawn on parchment, but with a map drawn by light. An archaeologist today might spend their morning not in a trench under a scorching sun, but in a climate-controlled lab staring at a screen filled with swirling, unnatural colors. This is the quiet revolution of the eye in the sky, where satellites and aircraft have become our most powerful tools for seeing what the desert has tried so hard to hide. The ground that looks barren and uniform to our eyes is to these sensors a detailed manuscript written in infrared, thermal, and radar signatures. Technologies like LiDAR, which fires millions of laser pulses to create a precise three-dimensional model of the surface, can strip away centuries of sand and scrub to reveal the ghostly footprints of ancient walls and roads. Multispectral imaging goes further, detecting subtle differences in plant health and soil moisture that betray what lies beneath. A line of parched grass might trace the course of a buried irrigation canal. A faint rectangular discoloration in the earth could be the foundation of a forgotten fortress. Experts in remote sensing use sophisticated algorithms to teach computers to recognize these patterns, to distinguish the straight lines and right angles of human construction from the random chaos of nature. It is a process of listening to the landscape's whispers, of seeing the invisible. This approach has rewritten history from orbit. In the deserts of Oman, satellite imagery helped pinpoint the legendary caravan city of Ubar, long thought to be a myth, by revealing ancient tracks converging like spokes on a wheel beneath the dunes. In Libya, radar scans penetrating the dry sands of the Sahara traced the vast network of underground tunnels and lost river courses that sustained the Garamantes civilization, showing it to be a hydraulic empire of astonishing sophistication. Seeing a city from this vantage does more than just find it, it fundamentally changes our perception. From space, you do not see individual bricks, you see the grand design, the deliberate urban planning, the sprawling network of connections that linked a city to its world. A faint grid pattern emerging from the sands speaks of a centralized authority of surveyors and engineers. A cluster of circular foundations might indicate a neighborhood of dwellings, revealing population density at a glance. These colorful images are the ultimate blueprint, providing a macro-scale guide for where to point a shovel. They tell the excavation teams, dig here, for beneath this patch of sand lies a gate, a temple, a marketplace. They transform the search from a hopeful gamble into a targeted investigation, proving that even the most lost of cities has left a shadow on the earth, waiting for the right light to reveal it. The ghostly outlines on a satellite image are just the beginning. To understand the city beneath your feet, you must learn to listen to the whispers in the soil. This is where the search shifts from the sky to the shallow earth, with a device that feels almost like a technological divining rod. A researcher walks a slow, methodical grid across the sand, pushing a cart with a humming box, its antenna sending pulses of energy into the ground. This is ground-penetrating radar, a tool that lets us see through the earth without ever breaking its surface. It works on a principle similar to sonar, but instead of sound, it uses radio waves. These waves travel downward until they hit something with a different density, like a stone wall or a void like a tomb. Then they bounce back to the antenna, creating a detailed echo map of everything hidden below. The data is collected in long, precise lines, and when processed by powerful software, it coalesces into a three-dimensional blueprint of the buried world. An experienced interpreter can read these scans like a medical radiologist reads an X-ray, distinguishing the sharp, straight signature of a human-built foundation from the softer, irregular shapes of natural geology. For archaeologists, this non-invasive approach is a gift. It allows them to map entire city blocks, to locate potential activity centers like workshops or shrines, and to identify the most promising spots for targeted excavation, all while leaving the vast majority of the site perfectly undisturbed. This protects fragile artifacts and structures that might be damaged by indiscriminate digging. The impact of this technology is beautifully illustrated at places like the medieval trading center of Taklamakan in Mali. Historical texts spoke of this city as a crucial hub for gold and other goods, but its physical traces on the surface were sparse. Ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed a different story entirely, showing a dense and extensive subsurface network of stone foundations, courtyards, and what appear to be market areas, confirming the city's historical importance and giving shape to its urban heart. These hidden architectural skeletons tell profound stories. The size and arrangement of rooms hint at social hierarchy. The presence of many small, connected chambers might suggest a residential quarter, while a large, open plaza could point to a public gathering space. It answers questions about daily life, how people moved through their city where they lived, worked, and traded. This method fills in the intimate details of the satellite's grand blueprint, transforming abstract shapes into the potential walls of a home, the outline of a storeroom, the footprint of a community. It is the crucial bridge between seeing a city's shadow from space and finally touching its stones. That three-dimensional blueprint from the radar scan now faces its ultimate test, the trowel. Excavation in a desert is not a frantic treasure hunt. It is a form of high-stakes, slow-motion surgery performed on the landscape itself. Every movement is deliberate, every grain of sand scrutinized, because here context is everything. The guiding principle is stratigraphy, the simple yet profound idea that the ground accumulates in layers over time, with the oldest material at the bottom and the newest on top. In a desert, these layers tell a particularly dramatic story. A thick band of clean, wind-blown sand might represent a century of abandonment, while a layer packed with ash, broken pottery, and charcoal could mark a single catastrophic event. An excavation director must think like a detective reading a crime scene that is also a history book, ensuring that every artifact, no matter how small, is recorded in its precise three-dimensional location. Was this coin found in a layer associated with a wealthy merchant's quarter, or was it lost in the dusty corner of a humble workshop? That spatial information can reveal trade networks, social divisions, and the flow of daily life. The desert environment itself is a demanding partner. The same relentless sun that bakes the ground also poses a constant threat to the team's well-being, requiring careful planning around the fiercest heat. Wind is a persistent adversary, threatening to erase delicate features and scatter vital clues in moments. Yet it is also the very force that, over centuries, can gently bury and preserve organic materials like wood, textile, and even food remains that would rot away anywhere else. The thrill of discovery in such a setting is unparalleled. A brush might reveal a ceramic oil lamp, its design echoing styles from a distant Mediterranean port. The outline of a small, rectangular foundation emerges, perhaps the stall of a market trader who once bargained over spices and salt. A single coin, minted in Baghdad but found in the sands of the Sahara, becomes a silent testament to a trade route spanning continents. But perhaps the most powerful story is told not by the objects themselves, but by the sequence of layers. A thriving city layer, rich with artifacts, might be abruptly capped by a sterile layer of sand, suggesting a rapid abandonment, possibly due to a lost water source or a shift in trade. Alternatively, layers might show a gradual thinning of finds, a slow decline in quality and quantity, painting a picture of a community dwindling over generations before finally slipping into silence. Excavation is where data transforms into direct human experience. It is the moment we move from seeing the ghostly outline of a wall to touching the very stones a medieval builder placed, and through that connection, beginning to hear the echoes of a city's final days. A single, colorful sherd of pottery can speak volumes. In the silence of a lost city, ceramics are the most reliable witnesses, fragments of a story that refuse to fade. Unlike wood or cloth-fired clay is virtually indestructible, surviving for millennia where other materials turn to dust. For an archaeologist, these broken pieces are not just debris, they are a universal language, a detailed archive of economic life, cultural exchange, and daily routine. Every pot, bowl, or plate carries a set of invisible fingerprints in its shape, its decoration, and the very clay from which it was formed. Specialists in ceramic analysis, the typologists and petrographers, are the translators of this language. Their work begins with typology, the careful classification of pottery based on its form and style. The curve of a rim, the pattern of a glaze, the way a handle is attached. These are all cultural signatures that change over time, much like fashion does today. By comparing sherds from a newly excavated site to well-dated examples from other places, researchers can establish a chronology, pinning layers of occupation to specific centuries. But typology only tells part of the story. To truly trace a pot's journey, scientists turn to petrographic analysis. They take a thin sliver of the ceramic, mount it on a slide, and examine it under a powerful microscope. This reveals the mineral fingerprint of the clay, the tiny grains of sand or crushed shell that were mixed in as temper. Just as a geologist can identify a mountain range from a rock sample, a ceramicist can often match this mineral signature to a specific clay source or production center, sometimes hundreds of miles away. This is how a humble fragment rewrites history. Imagine finding a piece of delicate celadon where its pale green glaze unmistakably from a kiln in medieval China, nestled in the soil of a Swahili coastal town in East Africa. That single sherd is not just an imported luxury, it is a data point, a physical proof of a connection across the vast Indian Ocean trade network. It forces us to redraw our mental maps, to see these desert cities and coastal ports not as isolated outposts, but as interconnected nodes in a globalizing medieval economy. On the ground of a buried city, the distribution of these ceramic fingerprints paints a social map. A dense scatter of expensive, imported glazed ware might outline a wealthy merchant's quarter or a temple precinct. An area filled with simple, locally made cooking pots and large storage jars could mark a residential neighborhood or a communal kitchen. The humble cooking pot itself is a treasure trove of information. Residue analysis can sometimes detect traces of its last meal, hinting at diet, while soot patterns on its exterior tell us how it was used over a fire. Was this a city that dined on locally grown grains and stews, or did their pots contain spices from Indonesia and oils from the Mediterranean? The ceramics answer that, revealing not just what people ate, but who they were connected to and how prosperous those connections made them. Through these broken pieces, we reconstruct the vibrant commercial pulse, the coming and going of caravans and ships, the clatter of a marketplace, and the quiet domestic life that once animated a place now silent beneath the sand. But the story of a city is not only written in its walls and pottery, it is written in the very plants its people chose to grow and eat. To understand a community's final days, you must look at its last meals. This is where the science of archaeobotany begins, a field that asks us to consider the most humble of artifacts, a single, charred seed. When a city is abandoned, its final stores of grain, its kitchen gardens, and the contents of its meals are often left behind, preserved in the most unlikely of places. Archaeobotanists, the detectives of the ancient plant world, do not search for grand treasures. They carefully sift through the dust of ancient hearths, the sediment of storage pits, and even the contents of latrines, collecting samples of soil that look like nothing more than dirt to the untrained eye. Back in the lab, they process these samples with water and fine sieves, a painstaking wash that reveals a hidden bounty. Tiny, carbonized seeds that were accidentally burned in a cooking fire and preserved for centuries. Minute fragments of pollen that tell us what was flowering in the surrounding landscape, and perhaps most fascinating of all, microscopic silica structures called phytoliths. These are rigid, glass-like particles that form inside the cells of plants, and their shapes are as distinctive as fingerprints. Long after a wooden beam has rotted or a basket has disintegrated, these durable phytoliths remain in the soil, silently marking the presence of a specific type of grass, tree, or grain. Identifying these remains allows researchers to reconstruct an entire agricultural system and diet. The presence of drought-resistant crops like millet or sorghum tells a story of adaptation, of a people consciously choosing hardy plants that could survive on less water as their environment grew more arid. Conversely, the surprising discovery of imported spices, like black pepper from India or coriander from the Mediterranean, in the middle of a desert settlement speaks directly to wealth and long-distance trade connections, hinting at a cuisine that was far from isolated. A powerful case comes from the Byzantine-era city of Nassana in the Negev Desert. Studies of plant remains there show a clear shift over time. In earlier, more prosperous layers, researchers find evidence of a diverse agriculture including water-intensive crops like grapes and figs. In the city's final centuries, as the climate became drier and political instability may have disrupted trade, the botanical record changes. The remains show a heavy, almost exclusive reliance on barley, a hardy but less nutritious grain that could survive with minimal moisture. This is not just a change in farming, it is a stark signal of a community under severe environmental and economic stress, simplifying its diet to survive. This data moves us beyond architecture and artifacts and into the intimate, daily reality of life. It answers questions about sustenance and survival. Did this city have enough to eat? Were they able to store surplus for lean years? How did their relationship with the land change as the desert advanced? The seeds and phytoliths tell us about crop rotation, soil health, and even cooking techniques, whether grains were ground into flour or boiled whole. They paint a picture of culinary culture, of flavors that once filled a marketplace, and of the profound resilience or heartbreaking vulnerability of a society living on the edge. To know what a city ate is to understand its strength, its connections, and ultimately the creeping pressures that may have led to its silence. The seeds of a last meal tell one story, but the bones left beside them tell another, far louder one. In the quiet dust of a forgotten courtyard, a specialist might lift a fragment no larger than a coin, its surface worn smooth by time. To anyone else, it is just a piece of bone. To a zooarchaeologist, it is an archive of survival, culture, and connection. This field, the study of animal remains from archaeological sites, transforms broken fragments into a vivid picture of how a community lived alongside the creatures in its world. The process begins with meticulous identification. Experts compare the size, shape, and unique anatomical landmarks of a bone fragment to vast reference collections, determining not just the species, but often the animal's age at its passing, its sex, and even its health from signs of disease or injury on the bone itself. The most telling details are often the smallest. Microscopic cut marks on a rib made by the precise slice of a flint or metal blade reveal butchery practices. The pattern of these marks can distinguish ritual slaughter from everyday food preparation. A heavy, repeated chopping mark on a leg bone might indicate an effort to extract marrow, a sign of nutritional stress, while a single, clean cut on a throat bone could point to a ceremonial offering. The very presence of certain animals paints a broad economic portrait. In the arid margins where many lost cities thrived, the bones of sheep and goats often dominate the record. These are animals of resilience, able to graze on sparse vegetation and provide a continuous yield of milk, wool, and meat. Their overwhelming numbers speak of a pastoral strategy finely tuned to a challenging environment. But then there is the camel, the iconic ship of the desert. Finding a camel bone is on one level expected, but context changes everything. A scattering of camel bones in a trash pit speaks of caravan transport and consumption. The discovery of a complete camel skeleton, carefully placed within a city's foundation or near a gate, tells a radically different story. This is not food, it is a ritual. Such a find, as zooarchaeologists have noted at sites along the Saharan trade routes, suggests the animal was part of a foundational offering, a ceremonial act meant to protect the city or bless its commerce. It reveals a cultural layer where an animal was not just a resource, but a symbol woven into the community's spiritual identity. Other creatures offer glimpses into social structure and reach. The remains of horses, often found in limited numbers and in specific areas of a site, frequently point to status and military power. Dogs might be found guarding homes or, in some cultures, included in memorial practices, hinting at companionship or spiritual beliefs. Perhaps most striking are the exotic arrivals. In a Silk Road city, a single bone from a parrot native to distant Indian forests, or a segment of ivory from an African elephant, does more than evidence trade. It speaks of a demand for the rare and the symbolic, of networks so robust they could deliver living creatures across continents. These animals were not livestock, they were likely cherished possessions or diplomatic gifts, silent witnesses to a city's prestige and its place in a wider world. Ultimately, this study of bones answers a profound question about resilience. How did a people's relationship with their animals help them endure a harsh climate or contribute to their struggle? A shift in the bone record over time can be deeply revealing. A gradual decrease in the age of slaughtered sheep, for instance, might indicate a population under pressure, culling its herds younger to maintain immediate food supply at the cost of long-term sustainability. The sudden disappearance of a once common species could signal an ecological tipping point. The animals people chose to rely upon, celebrate, and trade for were not passive background figures. They were active partners in the story of a city, and their silent remains remind us that survival was always a negotiated pact between human ingenuity and the living world they depended upon. The silent bones and seeds now have a voice, but to truly hear a city, we must give it back its shape. From the scattered foundations and fallen arches emerges a new form of archaeology, one that builds not with stone and mortar, but with light and code. This is the art of architectural reconstruction, where the ghostly blueprint becomes a living space. Specialists in this field are part detective, part architect, and part storyteller. They begin with the hard evidence from the ground, the precise measurements of a foundation trench, the angle of a fallen column, the unique imprint left by a specific style of mud brick. These fragments are the anchor points for the entire reconstruction. To fill in the vast gaps, they turn to the principle of architectural parallels. If a city gate from a certain period and region consistently had a particular design in 10 other well-documented sites, it becomes a reasonable hypothesis for the 11th. This is not guesswork, it is a form of rigorous comparative analysis, building a visual vocabulary from the known to interpret the unknown. The process now lives in the digital realm. Using sophisticated three-dimensional modeling software, these experts can extrude walls from their foundations, hypothesize roof lines based on the span a wooden beam could support, and test the flow of light and air through a proposed room layout. They can apply textures based on plaster samples found on site, and even simulate the wear of footsteps on a staircase. The goal is to create a testable hypothesis in visual form. Does this reconstructed courtyard allow for the communal gathering described in texts? Would this proposed windcatcher tower, a brilliant vernacular technology common in desert architecture, actually funnel cool air into the interior spaces as intended? These models are constantly refined against the data. A reconstruction might suggest a second story existed, but if excavation finds no evidence of a staircase strong enough to support that weight, the model is revised. This dialogue between the digital and the physical is where understanding deepens. Consider the medieval port of Suraf on the Persian Gulf. Historical accounts describe it as a fabulously wealthy hub of maritime trade. Excavations revealed substantial stone foundations and evidence of elaborate stucco decoration. When digital reconstructions began to layer buildings upon those foundations, a skyline emerged that told a story of both ambition and adaptation. The models showed multi-story merchant houses with shaded inner courtyards and rooftop terraces designed to catch sea breezes, speaking to a sophisticated understanding of passive cooling in a harsh climate. The scale and ornamentation of the Congregational Mosque, digitally rebuilt, visually communicated the city's prosperity and its central role in the community's life. This is the power of the method. It translates lists of archaeological features into an experiential understanding. We are no longer just looking at a plan of a building. We are seeing how the sunlight would have fallen through its latticed windows at noon, or how a trader might have navigated from the bustling docks through narrow, shaded streets to a warehouse. It allows us to perceive the genius of vernacular solutions, like the thick, insulating walls that kept interiors cool, or the cleverly angled walls that deflected the force of dust-laden winds. These reconstructions make the past tangible, not as a sterile collection of facts, but as a lived environment. They answer the most human of questions. What did it feel like to stand here, to walk through this market, to seek shelter from the sun in this room? By rebuilding a city in the digital space, we grant ourselves a form of time travel, stepping across the threshold of imagination into a world rebuilt from its own ruins. A city's skeleton tells a story of logic and survival. When we map the streets and walls of a place reclaimed from the sand, we are not just drawing lines on a page, we are reading the operational manual for an entire society. The layout of a city is its most profound statement, a physical declaration of how its people organized themselves, what they feared, and above all, what they valued most. In the harsh theater of the desert, this planning was not a luxury, it was a matter of life and death. Every decision, from the width of an alley to the thickness of a wall, was a direct response to an environmental challenge. Archaeologists and urban historians approach these silent blueprints as a complex puzzle, where the arrangement of space reveals a community's priorities with stunning clarity. A wide, straight thoroughfare leading from a main gate to a central plaza speaks of controlled trade and ceremonial processions. A labyrinth of narrow, twisting lanes in a residential quarter, however, suggests organic growth, privacy, and a brilliant adaptation to climate, creating shaded corridors that funnel any whisper of a breeze. This zoning of function is starkly visible. The dense cluster of small, identical rooms near a water source might be a workers' quarter. An open area with durable stone floors and evidence of heavy foot traffic, found near a main gate, almost certainly marks the marketplace, the economic heart where goods from distant lands changed hands. The presence of a single, dominant structure with a particular orientation, often larger and more ornate, points to a religious or administrative center, anchoring the community's spiritual and political life. But the most telling feature of any desert city is not found in its grand monuments, but in its relationship with water. Here, urban planning becomes an act of genius. The most sophisticated systems were those that worked with invisibility and gravity. The Qanat, for instance, was a breathtaking subterranean aqueduct. Skilled engineers would tap into a water source at the foothills and tunnel a gently sloping channel many miles long, bringing a reliable flow of fresh water to the city's heart and fields without a single drop lost to evaporation. The surface of a city would be dotted with access shafts for maintenance, looking like a line of strange, circular wells marching across the landscape, while below, a hidden river sustained life. Within the walls, every roof and courtyard was designed to capture and channel the rare rains into vast underground cisterns, sealed with waterproof plaster. Streets themselves were often subtly graded to direct runoff toward these reservoirs or to nourish communal gardens. This hydrological infrastructure was the true measure of a city's wealth and stability. A place like the circular city of Gur-e-Amir, with its concentric rings of walls and streets radiating from a central core, represents a powerful vision of order and defense, likely imposed by a central authority. The Abbasid city of Al-Rafiqa, built as a perfect rectangle with symmetrical gates and a cross-axial street plan, was a deliberate statement of imperial power and Islamic urban ideals, a calibrated machine for living. Yet the plan also reveals vulnerability. A city's entire existence was a precarious balance. If the delicate gradient of a khanat was disrupted by an earthquake, or if silt slowly choked its tunnel, the lifeblood would slow to a trickle. If a prolonged drought lowered the water table beyond the reach of the deepest well, the intricate system would fail. The urban plan, then, is a frozen moment of equilibrium. By studying how its veins and arteries were laid out, we understand not just how the city lived, but also the precise points of pressure that could cause its silent heart to stop. A stone slab worn smooth by centuries of wind holds more than just dust. When an archaeologist's careful brush reveals the sharp, deliberate lines of a carved inscription, it is not an artifact, it is a conversation. This field, Epigraphy, turns silent stone into a direct line to the people who lived here, offering names, dates, and declarations that no history book ever recorded. Where travelers' journals give us a visitor's perspective and broken pottery hints at economic life, inscriptions provide the official record and the personal voice, often in the same breath. Epigraphers are the ultimate translators, not just of language but of intent. They work with scripts that evolved for public display, like the angular, majestic Kufic Arabic favored for monumental Quranic verses and royal proclamations, or the elegant, flowing Sogdian script used by merchants along the Silk Road. Deciphering these characters is only the first step. The true skill lies in interpretation, understanding why these particular words were chosen, who paid for them to be carved, and what message they were meant to broadcast to the world and perhaps to the divine. A foundation stone from a mosque offers a perfect example. Inscribed with a date from the Islamic calendar and the name of a ruling sultan or a wealthy patron, it does more than mark a construction year. It is a political statement, a claim of authority and piety permanently etched into the city's fabric. It tells us who held power and wealth at that precise moment and how they chose to demonstrate it for public veneration. But epigraphy also captures the whispers of everyday life. Alongside these formal carvings, you might find informal graffiti scratched into a plaster wall by a traveler waiting in a caravanserai, a brief prayer for safe passage, or even a merchant's tally of goods. These casual marks are glimpses of individual thought, fleeting moments of hope, boredom, or record-keeping that survived purely by chance. They remind us that history was not only made by kings, but by the countless individuals whose names are otherwise lost. The stories these stones tell are profoundly human. An inscription from a frontier settlement might list the titles of a local governor, revealing how a distant empire administered its farthest reaches. A bilingual decree, carved in both Greek and Aramaic at a site like Palmyra, speaks directly to a diverse, cosmopolitan population, outlining laws and taxes in languages all could understand. It is a snapshot of multicultural governance. Personal dedications are perhaps the most moving. A simple plaque donated by a merchant to a temple, giving thanks for a successful journey, connects us to universal feelings of gratitude and relief. It answers deep questions about identity and belief. What gods did these people pray to for protection in the harsh desert? How did they see their role within a vast trading network or a powerful caliphate? The carved words provide direct testimony. Each deciphered inscription is a crack in the wall of time, allowing a sliver of light and a human voice to reach us across the silent centuries. These are not anonymous ruins anymore. They are places built by named individuals, governed by specific laws, and inhabited by people with hopes etched in stone. A silver coin carries the weight of an empire in its palm. When a numismatist lifts such a find from the sand, they are holding far more than currency. They are holding a time capsule of metal, a political manifesto, and a map of the world. The study of coins, numismatics, is a masterclass in reading the smallest of texts. Every detail on a coin's surface was placed there with deliberate purpose, a blend of propaganda, administration, and economic necessity that traveled in the pockets of merchants and the pouches of kings. The first clue is the metal itself. Was it struck from nearly pure gold, a high-value dinar meant for large-scale trade and royal treasuries? Or was it a debased silver dirham, its copper content slowly increased over time by a struggling mint, hinting at inflation or a shortage of precious metal? The very substance speaks to the economic health of the issuing authority. Then come the marks of identity. The mint mark, a tiny inscription naming the city where the coin was produced, is a geographic anchor. Finding a coin minted in Baghdad in the ruins of a Central Asian caravanserai physically traces a commercial artery across the map. The ruler's name and titles, often encircling the coin's edge, provide a precise date. When a new sultan came to power, one of his first acts was often to issue coinage in his name, broadcasting his authority to every corner of his realm. A change in the titulature, a new honorific added, can mark a political milestone, a military victory, or a shift in ideological stance. The iconography is equally telling. Early Islamic coins, for instance, initially bore images borrowed from Byzantine and Sasanian prototypes, but within decades, these figurative designs were replaced entirely by elegant Arabic script, a visual declaration of a new cultural and religious order. This transformation, when mapped through coin finds, shows the speed and consistency with which a new imperial identity was projected across vast distances. A coin's journey does not end at the mint. The wear on its surface, the smoothness from 10,000 handlings, tells a story of velocity and distance. A heavily worn dirham found far from its origin likely circulated for decades, passing through countless transactions along the Silk Road or Saharan trade routes. A pristine coin, sharp in its detail, might have been lost or hoarded soon after it was made, perhaps never fulfilling its intended economic purpose. Hoards themselves are frozen moments of panic or preservation. A clay pot filled with coins of various dates and origins, buried under the floor of a house and never retrieved, is a powerful signal. It often points to a sudden, catastrophic event, an invasion, a revolt, or an impending disaster that prompted someone to hide their wealth, hoping to return for a future that never came. Through these metallic fragments, we reconstruct the pulse of commercial life. The sheer volume of coinage from a particular mint found at a site indicates the intensity of trade. The variety of foreign coins reveals the breadth of connections. A single gold dinar from the Fatimid Caliphate, unearthed in the soil of a West African trading town like Tegdeost, is not just a pretty object. It is irrefutable proof of that town's integration into a trans-Saharan economic network that exchanged gold from the south for salt, textiles, and manufactured goods from the north. It turns the abstract idea of long-distance trade into a tangible, hand-held transaction, allowing us to trace the invisible lines of trust and value that once connected distant markets and made these desert cities into thriving, cosmopolitan hubs of exchange. That silver coin is just one piece of a vast and scattered puzzle. The true moment of revelation happens not in the field, but in a room where all the evidence finally meets. Picture a space where satellite images are pinned beside charts of pottery styles, where climate graphs overlap with maps of animal bone distributions, and a single timeline on the wall tries to make sense of it all. This is the interdisciplinary fusion, the critical stage where separate whispers become a single, coherent voice. Reconstructing a lost city is not merely adding up facts from different sciences, it is orchestrating a conversation between them, often where the evidence seems to disagree. The historian's text may describe a sudden, violent end for a city, a conquest by a named army, yet the archaeologist's layers show no clear ash horizon from burning, but instead a gradual thinning of artifacts. The climatologist's data might indicate a severe, decades-long drought precisely during that period. So, which story is true? The answer is that they all are. The interdisciplinary team's job is to reconcile these threads. Perhaps the historical conquest did happen, but it struck a city already crippled by environmental stress and economic decline, a final blow to a society already on its knees. The lack of a catastrophic burn layer could mean the city was not put to the torch, but simply abandoned, its buildings quietly dismantled for materials by those who left. This dialogue forces a more nuanced and ultimately more human understanding. It prevents us from latching onto a single, simple narrative. A brilliant example of this synthesis is the ongoing work at the ancient Silk Road oasis of Merv in modern Turkmenistan. For centuries, texts celebrated Merv as a queen of cities, a cosmopolitan hub. Excavations revealed immense walls, sophisticated water systems, and evidence of vast wealth. But to understand its life cycle, researchers had to weave together threads from countless specialties. Geomorphologists studied how the Murghab River delta shifted over time, affecting agriculture. Archaeobotanists analyzed seeds to track changes in crop patterns. Numismatists traced the flow of coins to see when trade connections flourished or faltered. Epigraphers deciphered inscriptions that named rulers and recorded laws. Only by overlaying all these datasets could the team see Merv not as a static monument, but as a dynamic organism that expanded, contracted, and adapted over 2,000 years, its fate tied to river courses, trade winds, and the ambitions of empires. This collaborative model is the engine of modern interpretation. It asks the geochemist studying plaster samples to talk to the architect modeling roof lines. It asks the zooarchaeologist identifying ritual camel burials to consult the scholar of medieval religious texts. The goal is to build a reconstruction that is robust enough to hold up under the weight of multiple, independent lines of evidence. How do we weigh a traveler's tale against a layer of sand? We do not choose one over the other. We listen to both, and in the space between their stories, we often find the richest, most compelling truth of all. The legend of Sijilmasa was written in gold. For centuries, Arab geographers described it as the final civilized outpost before the great ocean of sand, the place where caravans assembled to brave the Sahara and where they returned, laden with the precious dust of West African mines. These texts were not just stories, they were a treasure map. Historians knew from the writings of travelers like al-Bakri and Ibn Battuta that the city should lie in the Tafilalt oasis of southern Morocco, a green ribbon in an otherwise harsh landscape. But where exactly? The oasis was vast, and centuries of wind and shifting settlement had buried the original city deep. The search began with these ancient words, cross-referencing descriptions of river bends, mountain vistas, and caravan routes to narrow down a probable area. It was a promise whispered across 1,000 years that a city of such fabled wealth must have left a mark. Modern technology provided the first glimpse of that mark. Aerial photography revealed the faint, geometric shadows of large structures beneath the palm groves and modern villages. When archaeologists finally began to excavate, they found a city built for a singular, monumental purpose: control. Sijilmasa was not a casual trading post, it was a fortified economic engine. Its walls were massive, punctuated by sturdy gates designed to monitor and tax every camel and merchant that passed through. Within those walls, the city's lifeblood was not gold, but water. the team uncovered the remains of an extraordinarily sophisticated hydraulic system, a network of canals and underground channels that distributed the oasis's precious water with meticulous precision to gardens, homes, and public baths. This engineering was the foundation of its permanence, allowing a large population to thrive in the desert margin. The most telling discoveries, however, came from the soil of its workshops and markets. In areas believed to be the commercial district, excavators found tiny, meticulously crafted glass weights. These were the tools of the gold trade, used on delicate scales to measure minute quantities of dust and nuggets, ensuring fair exchange in a market dealing in immense value. Laboratory analysis of crucibles and sediment from workshop floors revealed microscopic traces of gold, the literal residue of the city's primary function. But Sijilmasa was more than a way station, it was a mint. They unearthed evidence for the production of coins, the famous Almoravid gold dinar that became a trusted currency across the medieval Mediterranean. To strike coinage was an act of sovereignty, declaring to the world that this city was not just a stop on a route, but a political and financial power in its own right. The goods found there painted a portrait of a cosmopolitan hub. Alongside local pottery were fragments of fine glazed ware from Islamic Spain, glass from Egypt, and beads that likely traveled from even farther afield. This was a city whose markets buzzed with languages and cultures, where a merchant from the Niger River could bargain with a trader from Cordoba, their transactions secured by the authority of the mint and the fairness of the glass weights. Sijilmasa was the vital plug connecting two worlds, filtering the gold of the south to the kingdoms of the north and channeling manufactured goods, salt, and ideas back in return. So why does such a powerful gateway stand in ruins today? Its end was a slow unraveling, a case study in the vulnerability of even the greatest desert entrepôts. Political instability from the 14th century onward saw the city change hands between rival dynasties, suffering through periods of conflict that disrupted the fragile trust and security the caravans required. At the same time, environmental pressures mounted. Evidence suggests the very water system that sustained Sijilmasa may have begun to falter, perhaps through siltation, a dropping water table, or the increased strain of a growing population. The final blow was likely a combination, a city weakened by internal strife becoming less able to maintain its complex infrastructure, just as the environment grew less forgiving. The caravans, sensing uncertainty, began to find other routes or diminish in size. The wealth faded, the gardens shrank, and the sands that had always waited at the city's gates finally crept into its streets. Sijilmasa's silence reminds us that a city built on trade is built on a network of fragile dependencies, where political order and ecological balance are the true foundations of gold. The Taklamakan is a desert of whispers and perfect silence. In the heart of Asia, this immense sea of shifting sand is one of the most arid places on Earth, a hyper-dry basin where the very air seems to steal moisture from everything it touches. Yet, along its ancient edges, buried beneath dunes that tower like frozen golden waves, lie some of the Silk Road's most evocative secrets. Cities with names like Nia, Lulan, and Muran once thrived here, lush oases fed by rivers flowing from the surrounding mountains. Their abandonment created a phenomenon of preservation so complete it feels like a breach in time. The same relentless dryness that made life a constant struggle also performed an extraordinary act of conservation. Without moisture, the processes of decay simply stopped. Organic materials that would vanish in a generation anywhere else were held in a state of suspended animation for over 1,000 years. Wooden architecture, intricate textiles woven with brilliant dyes, and even delicate documents written on paper and wood survived as if they were placed in storage yesterday. This environment, combined with salty soils, had a profound effect on the human story as well. naturally preserving individuals in a way that offers a unique, if solemn, connection to the past. Researchers approach these finds with immense respect, focusing on the cultural and historical insights they provide about health, attire, and ceremonial practices in this remote frontier. The artifacts pulled from the sands of these cities speak in a cacophony of cultures. In a single ruined temple at Murin, you might find the serene face of the Buddha painted in a style that echoes the Greco-Buddhist art of ancient Gandhara, a fusion born from Alexander the Great's long-vanished legacy. In a merchant's dwelling at Nia, a shard of vivid Roman glass or a coin from the Kushan Empire might rest beside locally made pottery. These were not isolated way stations, they were cosmopolitan hubs where the world's goods, and more importantly, its ideas, were exchanged. Buddhist monks traveled with merchant caravans, establishing monasteries and commissioning stunning murals that blended Indian, Persian, and Chinese artistic traditions into something entirely new for the region. The documents found here are perhaps the most direct line to these people's voices, written on wooden tablets and slips of paper in scripts like Kharosthi, an ancient Indian script used to write the Gandhari language. They record the mundane and the monumental. There are administrative decrees from local kings, tax receipts for bundles of silk, and legal contracts over disputes about camels or irrigation water. But there are also personal letters that cut through the centuries with raw emotion. A soldier writing home to his family about his loneliness on a distant garrison, or a merchant's wife pleading for news of his safe return. These writings transform the archaeological site from a collection of structures into a community of individuals with worries, laws, debts, and affections. So why did these vibrant crossroads eventually fall silent? The answer lies in the delicate balance of life in an oasis. These cities existed only because of rivers, particularly those flowing from the Kunlun Mountains into the Tarim Basin. Climate research and geological study show that these waterways were never static. They shifted their courses over time due to natural sedimentation, earthquakes, and changes in rainfall patterns upstream. A city like Lulan, which once controlled a strategic pass, found its life-giving river gradually changing course, leaving its canals to dry up and its fields to wither. Political changes amplified the environmental stress. As the Tibetan Empire expanded or the Tang dynasty consolidated its power, trade routes would be disrupted and military priorities would shift, making some oasis towns less vital to the security and economy of the region. The combination was often fatal, a slow environmental strangulation compounded by the loss of economic purpose. A community might hold on for generations, digging their wells deeper and their canals longer, but eventually the cost became too great. The decision to leave was likely a gradual, heartbreaking process for the last inhabitants, a final caravan abandoning homes and temples to the waiting dunes. Today, these cities stand as frozen moments of exchange, their very ruins a testament to the connections that once bound continents together. They remind us that the Silk Road was not just a line on a map, but a fragile network of human ambition sustained by water and will, both of which could, in the end, vanish into the same relentless sand. The Sahara was never truly empty. Deep in the Libyan desert in the Fezzan region, a civilization thrived for over 1,000 years, turning one of the most punishing landscapes on Earth into a network of green oases and bustling towns. They were the Garamantes, a people who mastered the desert not by crossing it, but by making it bloom. From around 500 years before the Common Era to the 7th century of the Common Era, they built a sophisticated urban society where logic said none could exist. Their story completely rewrites the map of ancient Africa, proving the desert was not a barrier but a home. The key to their survival was hidden beneath their feet. The Garamantes were hydrological geniuses. They tapped into a vast fossil aquifer, a deep, ancient reservoir of water trapped in the rock, and they built an astonishing network of underground tunnels called fagaras to bring it to the surface. These were not simple wells. A fagara was a gently sloping tunnel, often stretching for miles, dug from the point where they wanted water back toward the aquifer in the distant mountains. It was a feat of engineering and communal labor that required precise calculation to maintain the perfect gradient, allowing the water to flow by gravity alone, emerging in a sunken garden or a settlement to irrigate fields of wheat, barley, grapes, and dates. This invisible grid of life-giving channels supported a population that may have numbered in the tens of thousands, living in towns centered around formidable mud-brick castles that still stand as sentinels in the sand. For a long time, the scale of their civilization was a mystery, visible only in scattered ruins. Then we looked from space. Satellite imagery and aerial photography revealed the true extent of the Garamantes world. From orbit, researchers could trace the faint lines of long-buried fagara systems radiating out from central points like the spokes of a wheel. They mapped vast fields of thousands of burial mounds, organized in clear patterns that spoke of social structure and a long, continuous occupation of the land. The imagery showed the outlines of fortified villages and agricultural plots, painting a picture of a densely populated and carefully managed landscape. This was no nomadic culture, but a settled, urban civilization with a capital at Garama, a city with strong walls and multi-story buildings. Their prosperity is etched in the objects they left behind. Excavations have uncovered fine glassware from the Roman world, intricate beads, metalwork, and pottery that show they were key players in a trans-Saharan trade network. They likely controlled the exchange of luxury goods like ivory and exotic animals moving north, and Roman manufactured goods and wine moving south. They were the middlemen, the indispensable lords of the central desert routes. So what happened to these masters of the arid world? Their decline is a profound lesson in sustainability. The very system that gave them life contained the seeds of its own end. The fossil aquifer they tapped was not a renewable resource. It was a one-time treasure, like a vast underground lake with no refilling rain. Over centuries of relentless extraction, the water table began to drop. Maintaining the fagaras became an ever-deepening, more labor-intensive struggle. As the tunnels had to be dug deeper and longer to reach the receding water, the cost in human effort likely became unsustainable. Environmental data suggests the climate may have also become slightly drier over time, adding further strain. The combination of a dwindling resource and the immense work required to access it likely led to a slow contraction. Farmland was abandoned, settlements grew smaller, and the political and economic power that once made them lords of the desert gradually faded. By the time Arab travelers wrote of the region centuries later, the great Garamantes civilization had receded into legend, its greatest achievement, the hidden water channels, slowly filling with the very sand they had once conquered. Their legacy is a powerful reminder of human ingenuity in the face of extreme scarcity, and a sobering case study in the long-term calculus of survival, where every solution must account for the relentless passage of time. The silent retreat of a river is a slow, invisible war. While political conflict or economic collapse might leave dramatic scars in the archaeological record, the most persistent adversary for these desert cities often moved with the quiet, inexorable force of the climate itself. To understand their final chapters, we must widen our view beyond city walls and trade ledgers to the global rhythms of wind, ocean, and rain that dictated life on these arid frontiers. A new generation of climate historians is piecing together this planetary backstory, using natural archives that hold memories far older than any written text. Deep ice cores drilled from the glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica trap tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere, revealing past temperatures and greenhouse gas levels. Sediments at the bottom of long-vanished lakes in Africa and Asia preserve layers of pollen and dust, telling a story of wet periods and dry spells. The rings of ancient trees, some living and some preserved in ruins, act as precise annual diaries of rainfall and drought. When these diverse records are synchronized, a pattern emerges across continents, a timeline of climatic shifts that often align with the rise and fall of civilizations in startling ways. They reveal periods known as megadroughts, spans of 20, 50, or even 100 years where the rains simply failed to return with their former reliability. For a city like Angkor in Cambodia, whose sophisticated hydraulics fed a vast empire, tree ring data from Vietnam suggests a series of intense droughts in the 14th and 15th centuries, interspersed with devastating monsoon floods, placing unimaginable strain on the very infrastructure that defined its power. In the American Southwest, similar studies of tree rings precisely date a great drought in the late 13th century that coincides with the widespread abandonment of the magnificent cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde. The impact of such a prolonged climatic shift is not a single event but a cascade of failures. A decade of poor rains shrinks harvests, depleting the granaries that buffer a society against lean years. As the dry spell continues, the water table drops, causing wells and even sophisticated canal systems to run dry. The land itself becomes more vulnerable, and without ground cover, soil erosion accelerates. This environmental stress translates directly into human stress. Famine weakens the population. Competition for dwindling resources can fracture social cohesion, leading to internal conflict or a desperate migration toward areas perceived as more stable. Trade networks, the lifeblood of these cities, can fray as caravans find routes too hazardous or destinations no longer able to offer surplus goods for exchange. The climate did not wield a sword. It slowly turned the dials on survival until the equation no longer balanced. Yet, human action always played a part in this delicate equation. The concept of the Anthropocene, the age of human-shaped environmental change, arguably began long before the Industrial Revolution. In these ancient contexts, communities could unknowingly amplify their own vulnerability. Extensive deforestation for construction, fuel, or to clear farmland could reduce an area's ability to retain moisture and accelerate local desertification. Over-irrigation without proper drainage could gradually poison fields with salt, a process called salinization that rendered fertile land barren over generations. The great agricultural plains of Mesopotamia show clear evidence of this millennia-old problem, where the bounty of the Tigris and Euphrates was eventually undermined by the slow accumulation of salt in the soil. So how do we distinguish a city killed by climate from one felled by an army's sword? The evidence is in the layers. A conquest often leaves a clear horizon of destruction, a layer of ash, weapon fragments, and unburied remains followed by a rapid change in material culture as new rulers impose their ways. A city abandoned due to environmental pressures tells a slower, subtler story. The archaeological record shows a gradual decline, a thinning out of luxury goods, evidence of repairs to water systems becoming more frequent and then stopping altogether, and a final phase where buildings are systematically stripped of reusable materials like wood and metalwork, a sign of a planned departure rather than a sudden catastrophe. The truth, however, is rarely a simple either-or. More often, climate change acted as a threat multiplier. A prolonged drought could weaken a kingdom, making it ripe for conquest by a neighbor less affected by the dry spell. Economic decline from failed harvests could lead to political instability and rebellion from within. The climate set the stage, and human actors played out the tragedy. This interplay is the critical, sobering lesson for our honest reconstruction. It forces us to see these cities not as passive victims of fate, but as complex societies that navigated, adapted to, and ultimately were tested by forces both within and beyond their control. Their stories are a powerful reminder that the foundation of any civilization, no matter how grand its monuments or vast its trade, rests ultimately on a stable partnership with the environment it calls home. A discovery in the sand is not an ending but the beginning of a delicate conversation. For all our technical brilliance in finding and mapping these cities, the moment we touch them, we inherit a profound responsibility. The past does not belong to us, yet we hold its fragile pieces in our hands. This is the essential, often overlooked dimension of archaeology, the ethics of stewardship. Who truly owns a city that vanished centuries before modern borders were drawn? The answer is rarely simple, and it forces us to balance a thirst for knowledge with a duty to preserve. One of the most immediate and heartbreaking challenges is the race against time that begins the instant an object is exposed. An organic artifact, like a wooden tool or a textile fragment, can be preserved perfectly in the dry, sterile environment of the desert for 1,000 years. Yet upon contact with modern air, moisture, and microbes, it can begin to disintegrate within hours. The very act of rescue excavation can, paradoxically, trigger the object's final decay. This is why conservation scientists are integral members of any dig team, working in tandem with excavators to stabilize finds on site, using techniques like controlled drying and chemical consolidants to give these objects a fighting chance at a second life in a museum climate. Beyond the science, there is the human element of loss. The illegal antiquities trade is a shadow that falls across every significant site. Looters, seeking quick profit, destroy archaeological context with brutal efficiency, turning stratified history into a jumble of sellable trinkets. A looted tomb might yield a golden necklace for the black market, but in the process, the information about the individual who wore it, their health, their status, and their beliefs is erased forever. The artifact becomes an orphan, stripped of its story. This reality underscores why the role of local communities is not peripheral, but central. These are not just sites in a distant desert, they are part of a living landscape, often holding cultural, spiritual, or ancestral significance for the people who live nearby. Modern ethical frameworks emphasize collaborative archaeology. This means involving community members from the outset, not just as laborers, but as partners and knowledge keepers. Elders might hold oral histories that offer clues no satellite can see. Local understanding of the land, its seasonal changes, and ancient names can guide research in invaluable ways. When a community feels a sense of ownership and benefit from a project, they become its most passionate protectors, a far more effective deterrent to looters than any fence. This collaborative spirit extends to the complex question of repatriation. Many of the world's great museums are filled with artifacts excavated during colonial eras, removed from their places of origin with little consent. Today, there is a growing, necessary movement to return these cultural treasures. It is a process of reconciliation, acknowledging that an object's deepest meaning is often rooted in the landscape and community from which it came. As one heritage management professional notes, our goal should not be to extract stories, but to facilitate their telling by those to whom they matter most. In regions of political instability, this stewardship becomes an act of courage. Archaeologists and local custodians sometimes risk their safety to document and protect sites from deliberate destruction or collateral damage. They perform emergency stabilization, burying exposed features back under sand to hide them from view, a poignant echo of the very forces that preserved them centuries before. Finally, we must confront the power inherent in reconstruction. When we digitally rebuild a temple or physically consolidate a wall, we are not merely restoring, we are interpreting. The choices we make, which era to showcase, which architectural style to emphasize, carry weight. They can validate one historical narrative over another, potentially reviving cultural pride or inadvertently fueling modern conflict. Ethical archaeology, therefore, is a practice of humility. It recognizes that our fascination must be tempered by respect, that every discovery is a loan from the future, and that our primary task is not to possess the past, but to safeguard its fragile echo for generations yet to come. Sometimes the most profound act of preservation is to walk away. In a field dedicated to uncovering the past, a new philosophy is emerging, one that argues the safest place for a fragile site might just be beneath the sand it has rested in for centuries. The paradox is clear: the very process of excavation, while revealing a city, can also accelerate its decay. The solution lies not in the trowel, but in the scanner, in creating a perfect, immortal copy before time or human hands can cause further harm. This is the world of digital preservation, where we save sites by capturing their every detail without ever disturbing a single stone. The tools for this virtual resurrection are as precise as they are non-invasive. Teams now use laser scanners that emit millions of measured points per second, painting structures with a cloud of data so dense it can record the texture of individual bricks and the subtlest cracks in ancient plaster. Drones circle overhead, capturing thousands of overlapping high-resolution photographs. Through a process called photogrammetry, sophisticated software analyzes these images, identifying common points to stitch them together into a breathtakingly accurate three-dimensional model. The result is a digital twin, a replica with millimeter precision that exists in the boundless space of a computer server. This model becomes a permanent archive, a backup against all the threats a physical site faces, from the slow, granular erosion of wind-blown sand to the sudden tragedy of vandalism or the escalating pressures of a changing climate. A temple facade slowly crumbling from acid rain or a wall destabilized by more frequent flash floods can now be studied in its original, pristine digital state by researchers a world away, long after the original has faded. Projects across the globe are embracing this mission. In the Sahara, teams are digitally documenting remote rock art sites and fragile mud brick settlements, creating records before they are lost to the elements. In the Gobi Desert, entire complexes of endangered Buddhist cave temples are being scanned, preserving the exact contours of intricate wall paintings that are fading with each passing year. These digital twins do more than just create a safety copy. They democratize access to our shared heritage. A student in Buenos Aires or a history enthusiast in Seoul can now put on a virtual reality headset and walk through the narrow streets of a Saharan trading town, looking up at its reconstructed gates and peering into the courtyards of its homes, an experience once reserved for a handful of specialists who could make the arduous journey. This virtual access inspires a new generation to connect with these lost worlds, fostering a global sense of stewardship. This represents a fundamental shift in the very goal of reconstruction. We are moving from a model of physical recovery to one of perfect digital capture. The legacy of a city no longer rests solely on the artifacts we place in museum cases, but on the immersive, interactive experience we can build in the cloud. It is a new frontier where the most valuable excavation happens with light, not shovels, ensuring that even if the sands shift once more and reclaim what we have found, the memory of the city, in all its detailed glory, remains forever secure, waiting to be explored. The data points finally coalesce into a person waking at dawn. This is the true destination of our search, not the city, but the life it contained. After mapping walls and tracing trade routes, we must cross the final, most difficult frontier, the empathetic leap into the daily rhythm of a world silenced long ago. What did it feel like to walk those streets, to call this harsh yet vibrant place home? By weaving together threads from housing, small artifacts, and diet, we can begin to reconstruct the human tapestry, moving from the grand narrative of civilization to the intimate stories of individuals. Let us step into a morning in a bustling desert trading hub, perhaps a place like Qasr al-Hayya al-Sharqi in Syria, where the ruins offer a remarkably clear snapshot of domestic life. The air, still cool from the desert night, would carry a complex symphony of scents: the earthy smell of baking bread from clay ovens, the sharp tang of animal hides from a tanner's workshop, and the rich, layered perfume of spices being unpacked in the market: cinnamon from the east, cumin from the south. Your day might begin with the sound of water, the precious, metered flow from a ceramic jug into a basin for washing, or the distant chatter of women gathering at a communal well. The architecture itself dictated social patterns. Excavations of residential quarters reveal a common design focused inward for privacy and climate control. A heavy wooden door from the street would open into a central courtyard, an open-air heart of the home. This was where much of daily life unfolded, protected from the wind and dust, open to the sky. Rooms lined this courtyard, their uses often discernible by what was left behind. A room filled with grinding stones and charred grain might be the kitchen. Another, with a floor covered in reed matting and fragments of oil lamps, suggests a space for family gatherings in the evening. The size and ornamentation of these homes speak volumes. A larger compound with multiple courtyards and evidence of imported glassware points to a merchant family of considerable means. A smaller, simpler dwelling with basic local pottery hints at the life of an artisan or laborer. Within these walls we find the echoes of family. A small, carefully carved wooden toy animal, perhaps a horse or camel, tells of a child at play. The discovery of simple board games with grids scratched into stone or onto plaster floors reveals a universal desire for leisure and strategy. In the cool of the evening, after the sun's fierce grip had loosened, families might gather in the courtyard. Here, stories were told not of kings and conquests, but of the day's small events: the news from a returning caravan, a remembered tale of a clever fox or a generous spirit passed down through generations. This was also where fears and hopes found voice. What did people worry about? The evidence suggests their concerns were deeply human and immediate. They feared the failure of the water source, the illness of a child, the loss of a caravan carrying a season's worth of goods. They hoped for a healthy birth, a good harvest from the oasis gardens, and the safe return of a father or brother from a long trading journey. Their spiritual life permeated this daily existence. A niche in a wall, carefully oriented, might have been a home's prayer space. An amulet, a small stone or ceramic piece inscribed with a protective verse, found tucked into the foundation of a house, speaks to a desire for divine safeguarding for the household. The diet, reconstructed from seeds and animal bones, paints a picture of both routine and occasional delight. The daily meal likely centered on bread, dates, and a stew of lentils or goat, seasoned with those precious market spices. But a special occasion might see the sharing of a roasted sheep, or the rare taste of dried fruit from a faraway orchard. This synthesis of evidence reminds us that these were not abstract populations, but communities of individuals. A worn spindle whorl tells of hours spent spinning thread. A set of delicate bronze weights and a scale, found in a small room facing the street, belonged to a shopkeeper who measured out saffron or salt with meticulous care. The chisel marks on a stone block were made by a mason who took pride in his craft. To imagine the laughter of children playing in a dusty courtyard, the concentrated silence of a scribe in a merchant's office, or the weary satisfaction of a potter at the end of a long day at the wheel, is to complete the reconstruction. It transforms our understanding from a study of how a city functioned to a feeling of what it meant to live within it. A place where every sunrise brought the familiar struggle and beauty of building a life together at the edge of the world. The line between a lost city and a legendary one is often as shifting as the desert sands themselves. For centuries, storytellers and mapmakers have filled blank spaces on the world's edges with wondrous tales, from the glittering Aram of the Pillars, said to have been erased for its arrogance, to the mysterious Christian kingdom of Prester John, a promised land of piety and wealth that always seemed to lie just beyond the known horizon. These are not mere fables, they are powerful cultural memories, and when archaeologists begin their work, they must navigate this deep, pre-existing story. The romantic narrative, repeated across cultures, is one of sudden, catastrophic punishment, a city swallowed whole in a single night by the desert or the sea. It is a dramatic and morally satisfying arc, a divine retribution that explains a profound absence. Yet, the stratified earth almost never agrees. The story told by the layers is almost always one of slow, grinding change. Excavations reveal not a frozen moment of catastrophe, but a long sequence of adaptation and retreat, of repairs to water systems that eventually stop, of imported luxuries becoming rarer, and of buildings being carefully stripped of reusable materials before the final departure. This evidence points to a community making difficult choices over generations, not a populace surprised in a single evening. The reality is often less about wrath and more about resilience slowly meeting its limit. This process of demystification is a core part of the scientific narrative, replacing supernatural cause with environmental and social pressures we can study and understand. But to dismiss the myths entirely would be to miss their profound value. Legends are rarely invented from nothing, they are often distortions of a real signal. A place that was once thriving and then vanished is a shocking event for the surrounding regions, and human minds seek to explain such a monumental change. The story of a city punished in a night becomes a metaphor for the incomprehensible scale of its loss and a warning for future generations. More concretely, these stories can act as surprisingly durable containers for geographical truth. The tantalizing case of Yuba, mentioned in the Quran and Arabian folklore as a hub of great wealth and wickedness, long eluded explorers. It was treated as a purely legendary place. Then, in the 1990s, researchers combined these ancient textual clues with space shuttle radar imagery of the Arabian desert. The data revealed ancient caravan tracks like ghostly highways converging on a specific spot in modern Oman. Excavations there uncovered a substantial fortified settlement centered around a well, a crucial oasis for trade, that had catastrophically collapsed into a sinkhole. While not a city of supernatural punishment, the discovery showed the legend preserved a core truth, the memory of a wealthy, powerful, and suddenly lost trading center. The name and the fate had been amplified by time, but the geographical memory, the where, had endured. This creates a fascinating tension for those who reconstruct the past. The public's imagination is rightly captured by the romance of a lost city, a lore that brings attention and wonder to the field. The archaeologist's duty, however, is to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if that path is slower, more complex, and less theatrical than the myth. The most honest reconstructions now strive to do both, to acknowledge the power and cultural meaning of the legend while clearly delineating what the stones and seeds actually tell us. They show us that the truth, though often gradual, is no less compelling, a story not of instant divine judgment, but of humanity's long, negotiated struggle with an indifferent and changing world. The myth gives us the echo of the city's impact, while the archaeology gives us the fingerprint of its daily life, and in holding both, we come closest to understanding the full measure of what was truly lost. The next frontier in desert archaeology is being written not in field journals, but in lines of code and beams of subatomic particles. While satellite imagery gave us our first aerial maps of the past, the next generation of artificial intelligence is learning to see what even the most trained human eye cannot. Researchers are now feeding vast datasets of satellite and drone imagery into sophisticated machine learning algorithms, teaching them to recognize the faintest spectral and topographical signatures of human activity. These systems can process millions of acres in minutes, flagging anomalies that might be a collapsed building, a silted canal, or a ceremonial platform, patterns so subtle they blend invisibly into the natural landscape. This is not just about finding more sites faster, it is about asking entirely new questions of the data. An AI could be tasked to search an entire desert basin for a specific type of settlement pattern, perhaps identifying all potential caravan stops of a certain era based on their proximity to ancient water sources and trade corridors, effectively predicting where to look based on learned historical behavior. Beyond pattern recognition, physics itself is offering a new way to see through the Earth. Imagine a technology that acts as a colossal X-ray for a sand dune. This is the promise of muon tomography. Muons are elementary particles created in Earth's upper atmosphere, raining down continuously and passing through matter. Dense materials like stone walls or foundations absorb more muons than loose sand. By placing sensitive muon detectors around or beneath a dune field, scientists can measure the differential absorption and construct a three-dimensional density map of what lies inside. It is a slow, meticulous process, but it could one day allow us to peer into the heart of a dune 100 meters tall and map the layout of a buried fortress without moving a single grain of sand. This non-invasive vision could revolutionize how we assess and protect fragile sites, deciding where or if to ever break ground. The most intimate revelations, however, may come from the smallest traces. The emerging field of sedimentary ancient DNA analysis is turning dirt itself into a history book. Scientists can now extract microscopic genetic fragments from cores of sediment, fragments shed by every living thing that passed through an ancient environment. Using portable, rapid DNA sequencers in the field, researchers could analyze the genetic dust of a place. This paleogenetic soup contains clues from humans, animals, plants, and even microbes. From a single soil sample in a marketplace, we might reconstruct the genetic ancestry of the people who gathered there, identify the livestock they herded, and detect the presence of crop species that left no visible seeds. This could answer profound questions about migration and cultural exchange. Did the population of a city change genetically over time as new groups arrived with trade caravans? Can we trace the movement of specific livestock breeds across the Sahara as markers of pastoral traditions? Furthermore, the detection of ancient pathogen DNA in sediments could open a window into the health challenges of these communities, offering insights into how illnesses moved along trade routes and how populations may have been affected, all without ever studying human remains directly. It transforms the very ground beneath our feet into an archive of ecological and social history. These tools point toward a future where our interaction with a lost city becomes increasingly delicate and profoundly informative. The goal is shifting from excavation to ultra-precise, minimally invasive biopsy. We may reach a point where a multidisciplinary team, guided by AI surveys and muon scans, can deploy a suite of sensors to a pinpoint location. A small core sample analyzed on-site for DNA, phytoliths, and chemical residues could tell us the function of a room, the diet of its inhabitants, and the goods that passed through it. The story of these cities is far from complete. Each technological leap refines our questions, allowing us to move from wondering where a city is to asking who lived there, how they were connected, and how they experienced their changing world. The sands still hold countless narratives, waiting for the next beam of light, the next algorithm, the next quiet revolution in how we listen to the echoes of the past. These silent ruins are not just relics, they are mirrors. The stories we piece together from the sand hold urgent lessons for our own time, speaking directly to the challenges of sustainability, resilience, and the delicate balance between human ambition and the planet's limits. The past, in this light, becomes a vast, open-air laboratory, and these lost cities are the preserved experiments, showing us the long-term results of decisions made centuries ago. Consider the genius of the Garamantes and their fagaras, a triumph of innovation that tapped a deep, non-renewable aquifer. Their civilization flourished for over 1,000 years, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of scarcity. Yet their eventual decline whispers a critical warning about the finite nature of even the most cleverly managed resource. Today, we face a parallel reality with aquifers like the Ogallala in the United States or vast underground reserves in India and the Middle East, which are being depleted for agriculture and cities at rates far beyond natural recharge. The ancient lesson is clear: a technology that provides abundance can also, without careful long-term management, chart a course toward depletion. The Garamantes did not have our scientific models, but their archaeological record shows a slow, grinding contraction as maintaining those tunnels became an unsustainable burden. For us, their story reframes the question from simply how to extract water to how to live within a water budget that honors future generations. The crumbling way stations of the Silk Road offer another profound parallel, this time about interconnection and fragility. These cities thrived on the flow of goods, ideas, and people across continents. Much like our modern global supply chains and digital networks, their prosperity was entirely dependent on stability along vast, vulnerable corridors. A shift in political alliances, a conflict in a distant region, or an environmental disaster that closed a mountain pass could choke the life out of a thriving oasis town. We see this vulnerability echoed today when a blockage in a single canal disrupts world trade, or when a regional conflict triggers energy and food crises across the globe. The ancient cities teach us that hyper-specialized nodes in a network are powerful, but also perilously exposed. Their abandonment patterns show that when the flow stops, reinvention is difficult, and migration often becomes the only option. This connects directly to our contemporary understanding of climate migration, where environmental pressures like desertification or sea level rise are already prompting communities to leave ancestral homes, seeking new places where the equation of survival still balances. The past shows us this is not a new story, but a recurring human response to environmental change. Historians of sustainability now study these sites not as curiosities, but as essential case studies. They argue that within the silent layouts of these cities lies a form of ancient wisdom, coded in urban planning and resource management. The intricate Qanat systems of Persia, or the sophisticated rainwater harvesting of Nabatean Petra, were not just engineering feats. They were cultural adaptations born from a deep, hard-won understanding of local ecology. They represent a vernacular science of survival that worked with the environment rather than attempting to dominate it. This contrasts sharply with the mindset that led to the salinization of Mesopotamian fields through over-irrigation, a lesson in how short-term gains can poison long-term fertility. For our modern world, grappling with climate change and resource scarcity, this ancient wisdom points toward a crucial principle: the need for distributed, resilient systems. It argues against putting all our water in one centralized dam, or all our trade through one hyper-efficient corridor, and instead favors diversified, localized solutions that can withstand a shock. The reconstruction of these cities, therefore, is more than an academic exercise. It is an act of recovery. We are not just rebuilding walls, we are retrieving a lost library of adaptive strategies, reminding ourselves that human societies have faced these pressures before, and their successes and failures are a guidebook written in stone and sand for the future we must now build. That fragmented legacy is a mirror we hold up to our own world. Reconstructing a lost city is in its deepest sense an act of recovery, not just of stones and artifacts, but of a conversation with time itself. We have followed the clues from ancient travelers' journals to the silent gaze of satellites, from the patient brush of an excavator to the digital light of a three-dimensional model. We have listened to the stories told by seeds, animal bones, and the faint impressions left in wind-blown soil. In meeting the Garamantes, the masters of hidden water, or walking the silent streets of Sijilmasa, a city built on the weight of gold, we do more than satisfy historical curiosity. We witness the profound dialogue between human ambition and the immutable rules of the environment. These places stand as monumental testaments to ingenuity, to the brilliant ways communities forged life in the margins. Yet their silent ruins also speak with equal force about fragility, about the slow, creeping pressures of a changing climate or the sudden rupture of a trade route. They are not failures but profound lessons in the long-term calculus of survival. Each reconstruction is a reminder that civilizations are not permanent monuments but ongoing experiments in balance. The technologies that sustained them, from qanats to fagaras, were born from a deep, vernacular understanding of local ecology, a form of wisdom we are now urgently relearning in our own era of environmental change. The sands that preserved these cities did so with perfect indifference, and in that indifference lies a powerful truth. The past does not judge us, but it offers evidence. It shows the outcomes of choices made under pressure, the resilience of communities, and the ultimate dependence of even the grandest society on the stability of its foundation. As we look to a future where many of these ancient pressures are returning in new forms, these buried cities challenge us to listen. They ask us to consider our own foundations, our own water sources, and the resilience of the networks that connect our world. If this journey through hidden histories has sparked your curiosity, there are countless more mysteries waiting just beneath the surface. Consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of our world. And we would love to hear from you. Share in the comments below which lost city from any corner of the globe you would most want to see reborn from the shadows of time. The desert's silence is not empty, it is full of stories, and for every city we have found, the sands still hold countless secrets, patiently waiting for their turn.